So I wanted to talk a little bit more about Stoicism today and to address this issue of indifference. And I saw a video earlier where someone was talking about how the Stoics in the ancient world had developed a practice and an idea of indifference, and it was partly to endure the great hardships that were forced upon people, certainly slaves, in the ancient world. Okay, all of that is true. We want to set up the right context for this. Um, Musonius Rufus was a ancient Stoic who wrote a paper that was once called "Should Even Women Study Philosophy?" And the answer was yes. And unlike the Peripatetic school, which was the school indebted to the Aristotelians, and unlike the Platonists, which go back to Plato, uh, who those two schools did not welcome women. They, in fact, excluded women, whereas the Stoics openly welcomed women, and they openly welcomed slaves, and slaves were often taught Stoicism in the same way that ancient soldiers were, and it's no surprise that the two great exponents or the two people who made great statements about Stoicism in the ancient world were Marcus Aurelius, a ruler of Rome, and um, Epictetus, who was a slave who was then freed because of his great um, mastery over the Stoic practices and the Stoic worldview. Now, to get at this issue of indifference, I think we need to understand that the Stoics weren't simply indifferent in the way that we think of indifference today. They weren't going, hell, life's a bitch, just deal with it. That's really not, I mean, I think that's a misinterpretation, or it would be a real gross misunderstanding of what the Stoics meant by indifference. There is a story that is told about Epictetus. It's a somewhat famous sort of apocryphal tale of the master he had a very brutal master, and his master was tugging on his leg one day. And this is how he was originally lamed, is the account for how he was originally lamed. Because Epictetus was a poor man. He carried nothing but like a cane, and he had he lived with a woman later in life, and they adopted a boy, but he was a lamed man. Well, anyway, the story of his laming was that his master was tugging on his leg, and at one point, Epictetus turned to him and said, "If you pull any more, you will break it." And the master tugged, and it broke, and Epictetus retorted, "There, I told you you'd break it." And there is a kind of indifference to the suffering that was endured, the kind of hardship. Now, the suffering is to be understood, and the hardship is to be understood with a kind of indifference. But the indifference, I would argue, is best understood as grateful indifference. Now, I think to the modern mind that almost doesn't make sense. If you say to people you should be gratefully indifferent, they say, "What? No, that doesn't make sense to me. Either you be indifferent or you be grateful." I think the Stoics were able to accomplish grateful indifference, and that's the importance of studying Stoicism. If you try to understand the distinction between what's under your control and what's not under your control, and if you get really, really clear on that, and you start to understand that there are things that are under your control and there are things that are not under your control, and the task is to completely align yourself with ethical vigilance and duty to only those things that are under your control. If something's not under your control, it's nothing to you. If you look at our culture, we're almost the opposite of that on tons of fronts. People are always running around worried about the reputation they have, how others think of them, their office, their wealth, even to some regard your health. Now, you can take care of your health, but I think we all know James Fix, right? The high IQ guy who was famous for running. I mean, he died of a heart attack while running, right? There's ironies, and to be gratefully indifferent to it all, to realize that there is much that you can control. It's your will to do good, your genuine intent to take care of the world within your domain as best you can. The athlete would be the exemplar. Um, you have to accept that defeat may be part of the deal, no matter how bad you try, and other people may cheat, but the task is to do the right thing regardless of what other people do. You can't control what other people can do. They'll do whatever they'll do, and you have to accept that without cheating yourself. You don't resort to cheating. Now you could say, well, cheating is in your control. Well, that's not at all. See, the Stoics would advocate a notion that you have to practice virtue, and virtue is things like courage and forbearance and temperance and uh, goodwill toward others in a broad cosmological sense. I mean, Epictetus was once asked where he was from, and he responded, I am a citizen of the world. I mean, many people think that Epictetus issued the world's first cosmopolitanism, right? He saw himself as a citizen of the world. Um, I want to go back to this notion of grateful indifference because I think that's really what this is about. It was trying to help people in the ancient world understand that they should just be gratefully indifferent because whatever life's gift is, it's a gift that gave some things under your power, but not everything. And to be happy with that. It's sort of like there's this one passage in the Harvard Classics where God says and by God, the Stoics mean the fates. They mean divine providence. They mean the order of things. They mean highest mind or the gods, right? But God says um, to Epictetus, he says, I couldn't give you everything. I couldn't give you the capacity to be without hardship. I couldn't give you the capacity to not die. The best I could do was to form you as you are, but I could give you a little portion of myself, a kind of ultimate freedom, which is the freedom of the mind to make the meanings of the things, to have the judgments of the things, and to let those judgments be a resonance or an alignment with the order of things. I think the Stoics saw their task to humbly bring oneself into alignment with whatever happened, and you call it providence or fate. You do your best at all points, and at every point, you just accept whatever happens, and you can be gratefully indifferent if you're able to accomplish that. You strive, you work hard, you set goals, you do everything you can to live a virtuous life, a good life, and if it doesn't work out, if there's hardship, and if you die in the end, you still say thank you and you're gratefully indifferent. You're gratefully indifferent. I don't think it's that hard to understand. I think it is until people really start to look at the works of Epictetus or until people really look at the works of the Stoics, the ethical writings of Seneca. Marcus Aurelius, I like Marcus Aurelius. I think Epictetus is the place to start. The Discourses and the Enchiridion, or the Manual. That said, okay, thank you.